All right, welcome everybody to the first Skylight Public webinar. Thank you for joining today. I will be speaking today about software metrics for Civic Tech. My name is Nicole Wright. I'm a product manager at Skylight. I work on the defense services side, and I've been involved with defense tech for coming up on 5 years now. So been around the block a little bit, and I've seen a lot of exciting changes. And I'm here to talk with you a bit more about measuring success. So my first question for y'all is, you don't have to raise your hands or talk, but I'm wondering, do folks here have any, are you involved or do you have yourself an investment in digital transformation? How is that going? I'm curious if you might be able to, how do you know if those efforts are working? That's what we're going to be talking about today, what you can do to know that you're going to be successful with your digital transformation. It can be really tricky to measure this, and I know it often feels like in the civic tech space that there's maybe extra roadblocks that the rest of industry doesn't need to deal with. But I'm here to tell you how we can make these metrics work for us and how you can increase your feedback loops to avoid being long or indirect. My objective here is to demystify the success metrics to empower teams so that you may be able to deliver value at a sustainable pace forever. I am not a technical person, so for me, when I was learning these terms, I sometimes felt a little bit overwhelmed or out of my depth. So my goal is going to be to speak in as plain language as possible today. These metrics overall, you might be familiar with about them. They are going to be what feels like eating your vegetables. They are not sometimes as fun to track all of the time, but I promise you it will be worth it for a strong and healthy product or organization. So today I'm going to spend a bit of time going over some definitions of words I'm going to be using throughout the talk. We're going to talk about metrics overall and dive into a little bit about two main different types of categories, stability and tempo. Tempo and stability, that's the order it's going to be. Then we're going to talk about how to measure them, how you can start doing them yourself today. I'll provide you with some tips and tools for being able to take the learnings with you to work with tomorrow, provide some resources, and we'll definitely have time at the end of this hour for discussion. I don't think I'll probably be talking for about 20 to 30 minutes, so there'll be a lot of time for folks to share their ideas and their questions at the end. So why do you want to measure success metrics for your program overall? The first thing is you want to be able to assess your organization or your product's success. Be able to have some data to speak to exactly how you are doing. And if you are able to identify how you are doing, you're going to be able to identify problem areas. Once you're able to identify problem areas, you're going to be able to have data to support where you want to prioritize solutions for problem areas. Over time, you're going to be able to observe trends. How are you doing? Are things actually improving here? Are they maybe trending downwards? Have some data as to why. Overall, the intention is to get better at your metrics, however, and you're going to see how this is going to build a virtuous cycle, not only for your team and your product health, but just your overall vision. You're going to be able to deliver and learn with your value. We're all in civic tech, so we're all here because we really care about what we're building, getting it out to your users, to the public, so that they can have their lives improved. And overall, this tracks to delivering value and learning to continue to deliver what's valuable next. So diving into some definitions. When I was first starting out as a PM, I could not tell you exactly what the definition of a release is. So I'm here today to tell you the definition of a release is a polished version of your application that's passed through tests and it has a version number assigned to it. So for instance, maybe if you have out in production version 1.13 and in your acceptance environment, you've got a couple of new things in there, it's ready to go, that will be 1.14. So maybe in In the use it in a sentence way, you're going to say, let's cut a release. What you're talking about is getting something that has not been contained yet and snapping that chalk line, sending something out. That's the next release. And how does that differ from a deployment? Sometimes we use these terms interchangeably, but deployments, particularly in this talk, is going to be when that release has hit an environment, most specifically a production environment. So you can have a release that is deployed, and sometimes you'll hear folks use release and deployment both as nouns, but they can also be verbs. But I hope this helps clarify deployments equal the user gets to use them. Another way to think about it, if it's getting a little bit squishy in your head, oh, I've got some problems with the graphics. I promise they're coming. When you think about maybe a year ago, or it was longer now, we were all waiting to get vaccines from the latest pandemic, and they were all being shipped out. We were all very excited that things were about to come our way. You can think about that as code being completed, but it's not. It's in like a testing environment. Maybe it's waiting to be released. That's a release version. We've got an individual vial. We've got the stuff ready to go, but it's not going to be actually valuable until it's deployed into your particular arm. That's when you're going to be able to get enjoyment out of that deployment. So it needs to be where a user can access it for a deployment to count as complete. Moving on, just to be a little bit more clear overall, today we're talking about DevOps processes overall, so it might be helpful to bring in this definition from Amazon Web Services. DevOps is a combination of cultural, philosophical practices and tools that were able to increase our organization's ability to deliver applications and services at a high velocity, evolving and improving products at a faster pace than organizations using traditional development and infrastructure practices. So DevOps, it can be kind of squishy, and if you're kind of getting confused because it feels like I don't really know what it is, it's because it's a lot of things, and some of them are that intangible cultural or philosophical processes. Adding further to the confusion, you might hear folks say DevSecOps. It's the same thing, but it's getting more in vogue sometimes to call out security as an important part of that process. Security is essential to having a successful product, and sometimes it's helpful to call that out specifically when you're using terms like DevOps to make sure folks know that you're definitely considering it. So, getting into the meat of it though, what are DORA metrics? So the DORA metrics are identified by the DevOps Research and Assessments team, which is a research team based at Google that's analyzed software practices over tens of thousands of teams. They've interviewed and researched software professionals, and they release an annual State of DevOps report. They have identified 4 metrics as a standard indicator of success across all industries, including civic tech. The first one is deployment frequency, which is how often an org successfully deploys into production. Mean lead time, which is the time it takes from code to go from committed to into production. Mean time to restore or mean time to recover is how long it takes to restore service in an outage. And change fail rate is the percent of releases or deployments that require some sort of fix immediately. And that could take different shapes. Maybe it's a rollback, maybe it's the hot fix or a patch to improve whatever problem is in production. Any one of those failures that need an immediate solution would count as something influencing your change fail rate. So what we have here is the standard template for where teams fall in terms of, are they considered an elite performer, high, medium, or low? As you can see, there's kind of some generous gaps, particularly with this change fail rate and the mean time to restore. There's some really big gaps in the middle. It's kind of either you're super fast or you're kind of more middle of the road pack. But generally, this has been the standard. It has not really changed year to year. Elite performers are deploying multiple times a day. I haven't seen this change over the past couple of years. So it's pretty standard, not going anywhere anytime soon. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these in a little bit more depth. What we'll talk about first are the ones relating to speed. Those are sometimes categorized as the tempo metrics. They're lead time and frequency. So lead time will inform deployment frequency, usually at certain rates. As you can imagine, if it takes you 2 days to get code out, you're not going to have a multiple times a day deployment frequency. I guess you probably could, but it seems like a huge headache. So you're going to have a virtuous cycle if things are healthy, and likewise the other way around. If your lead time or deployment frequency is suffering, they're going to inform each other there. When you start to measure your lead time and your deployment frequency, this is a really great way to start to get insight into how your CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines are doing. If you notice that there's room for improvement, it's a great time to think about, where is something ineffective? Is there something manual that we're doing in our testing process or not doing that we could automate to move this along more quickly? I wonder if there are any PMs in the room. If I were to say, okay, what is stopping y'all from going back to your computer or opening up your other tab and hitting a deployment for your product right now? If you're kind of groaning internally because you got to do X, Y, and Z, it's super painful, that's an indicator that there's something that you could probably improve. So when you start to think about your tempo metrics, I would encourage you to lean into what is painful, because when something hurts and you do it more often, as Martin Fowler says here, you're going to be more inclined to want to fix that, and you're going to be able to start to improve that virtuous cycle. Excuse me. And why ultimately would it be great to improve that virtuous cycle? Well, that's because every time that we're able to deploy, as I believe we all know, that's where the value is. When we're able to do a launch a couple of times a week, a couple of times a month, we're able to deliver something valuable to our users right away. I think early in my career, somebody once asked me, if you have something in acceptance, why would you not deploy it to production right now? What's stopping you? Sometimes there's a really great reason, like there's this bug in the code that I can't ship out. But sometimes it's, I don't want to take 30 minutes to go through all of like the bits and bobs you got to do. Those are the things I should improve, so then I can just, you know what, you're right, I should send this to the users today. Bring that value out to the users today. So all of that is really great. Maybe all of y'all are wondering about cutting a release right now. But you want to also be reminded that speed at the price of stability is not ideal. As the DORA template has indicated, you have to hit all of the categories to achieve, an elite status here. If you want to be elite, you have to do both. So we'll talk a little bit now about the stability metrics. They are sometimes overlooked. They aren't as sexy, they aren't as feel good, but they are essential. So first one we'll talk about is the change fail rate. If you're releasing, but you're noticing that very frequently you need to ship a hot fix or you need to roll back, that's a great way to stop and reflect about what can you start to do to improve this in the future. I know this is something I've had to think about on my product team for myself. I'm trying to get more eyes into the final review process to catch things that I'm going to miss. How many people are reviewing this? Are you trying to break your stories when you accept them? And like think about all of the different ways a user might use a new feature that maybe wasn't the path that you were thinking about. But if you end up accidentally crashing your whole app because you took a real weird path, getting ahead of that might be able to avoid a situation where you have to do a rollback and have the user experience that as well. Maybe think about incorporating TDD or test-driven development if that's something you haven't explored yet. give it a thought there. I know it's a big subject, but it can also help quite a bit. And just in general, also review your testing scenarios to make sure that they're comprehensive as well. All that to say, though, failure is definitely going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. Everybody goes down. I think Facebook famously went down a year or so ago. Everybody's down all the time. It's just a fact of life. So one thing that we also have to be comfortable with is not trying to avoid this failure, and know that if we don't ship to prod, we're not doing anything at all. The tickets aren't done. We haven't learned anything yet. You need to sometimes fail to learn. And if that's what you need to do what you can to improve your mean time to restore. Have an outage fire drill with your team. Make sure you have an incident response plan that folks know what to do when this happens, how you're going to be able to have a low mean time to restore so your users aren't being continuously frustrated with trying to access your application and finding that they're unable to do that. You can also think about how to make sure you're doing postmortems following your outages, make sure that's part of your incident response plan. So you're able to also continue to iterate and improve what you can do to improve your mean time to restore. This is also virtuously going to improve your lead time because you're going to have a shorter lead time. You're also going to be able to have a mean time to restore. Probably once you're able to find the code that fixes that problem, you can ship that out pretty quickly thanks to your short lead time. Another way to kind of think of these scenarios in real life examples, some of us are not as lucky in our dental health and you need a root canal. Are you going to go to a dentist who performs the procedure every couple of years, a couple of times a year, or are you going to go to somebody who's doing this every week, who knows if something goes haywire in the moment, they're able to quickly respond to that situation and bring out a solution? I would prefer somebody who can maybe even do it in their sleep. So I know that, I can wake up and keep going. If there was a bump on the road, I know that they can also take care of it. Yeah. So overall, as a review, there are four types of metrics for the DORA standard for indicating product health. Two are the tempo metrics, which are constantly encouraging us to deliver value and be learning from our products. And the other two stability metrics are acting as guardrails and making sure that we're also delivering quality when we're delivering that value. And ultimately, why we want to do this is to, everything is a loop here, enable continuous feedback. When we're able to continuously deploy small iterative improvements, we're also then able to learn from those deployments frequently. If you're deploying every week, you're going to get feedback from your users every week. Was this a good feature to implement? Is this product headed in the right direction? If you're only deploying a couple of times a year, you don't have a lot of data to definitively know if you're headed in the right direction or not. So by improving all of these metrics, you're able to ultimately have more confidence to know and not assume that your product is heading in a great direction. Now, all of that to say, I'm pretty sure we all are maybe thinking, that sounds great, but I don't know how to track this at all. I don't want to have to pay some of these services that are out there to measure these things for you. But great news, I have taken a stab at it myself. Following this talk, we'll be sending out materials if you are interested in a very hacky, very lean slice Excel version of tracking your DORA metrics, which our team has been using ourselves. I will not painstakingly go through Excel cells for you, but I hope you might be inclined to go through them yourselves to figure out exactly how we're calculating it, and please do iterate on what works for you. But in a nutshell, you just need a couple of cells to track this out. Doesn't take much longer than writing your release notes as part of your process to get updated DORA metrics every time you deploy. So for our team, we snap the chalk line for when code is committed, for when it's ready for PM review. on a story that I personally, as a PM, would have accepted. So because as the theory goes, that value was ready for the user once the devs brought it to the acceptance environment. So we just take the delta from the earliest ticket in that batch to when we hit the deploy, and that's how we're calculating lead time. Deployment frequency is very squishy, very fast on when you start to think about how do you calculate frequency. It's quite difficult. We set a standard of a deployment frequency of 1 is 1 per week. We're shooting for high here. We're not really going for elite at this stage in the game. So you can see how we are measuring that on the Excel sheet itself. We take our change fail rate, which is being honest with ourselves over, did we have to ship a hot fix on that past deployment? Just tick yes if that was a fail, changes the average. And mean time to restore is the average dates for the lead time between the deployment that failed and the deployment that fixed it. So it's a little manual. It looks a little something like this. This is what the template looks like. I hope I've provided enough language, and in the cells you can see the math to see how that's calculated to make it usable for yourself as well. You can have fun with conditional formatting and track your trends on how you are doing. This is just the standard, not our current DORA metrics. We're not deploying quite that fast just yet. And we also have some additional resources. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, I would most highly recommend the book Accelerate by Dr. Nicole Ferguson, Jean Kim, and I think a few more. It is super helpful, very insightful for just learning even more about why all these metrics can be so valuable. And that is all of the content I have on the slides. So I will just open it up for further questions and comments. Thank you.